Geek Therapy Radio.
Welcome to Geek Therapy Radio. You've got your mental curator, Johnny Hamburger. GeekTherapyRadio.com for more information, all those good plugs. Geek Therapy Radio on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, YouTube, all that good stuff. Speaking of YouTube, you know what? Life's been crazy for the past few weeks, to say the least. Those of you who don't know, I live here in Texas, and we just went through that crazy winter storm here in Texas where the entire Texas electrical grid failed. I've talked about that on past shows since then. I won't go into it any further on this podcast or on this radio broadcast, but that has just added to the milieu of things going on over the past few weeks. So I apologize for the lack of YouTube content, and I say that because I am recording this right now, this radio broadcast. I'm also recording it to upload to YouTube, so get ready with a thumbs down, the dislikes, all that stuff, whatever you want to put on this video. I just haven't uploaded a YouTube video in a long time, and I thought maybe it would be fun for some of my subscribers, at least, who are into this kind of thing, to see what happens, see how I record a radio show. And really, this is it. I have been setting up my new studio in my home. I've basically been moving it from one room over there, about 10 feet over there, to 10 feet over here. We are making that bigger room the guest room slash nursery for my son Riker. And the smaller room, which was his nursery, is now my geek cave slash studio. So if you're watching on the YouTube channel right now, you can see that I have my cubicles, my Target MDF particle board cubicles all set up here. I've got a green screen. Let me pull it down here. And I got to keep talking because this is the radio and you can't have too much dead air. So I'm going to pull it down just enough on the video so you can see that I have a green screen set up here. You may have seen it if you follow me on Geek Therapy Radio on Instagram. But yeah, so there's the green screen. I can probably pull it down a little bit further. When I use the green screen, I'm going to be standing, so it's perfectly adequate. It's just a newer green screen. I got it on Amazon for... it was on sale for like $60 or $70, down from like $130. So yeah, I've been setting up the studio because one of the things that has been so busy for me recently, and this is kind of where I'm going with this segment at least, and maybe it'll spill over to other segments, is kind of the anxiety that comes along with being paid to be creative. A lot of us think that, I can't, if I had a job that paid me to be creative, then I'd be all set. Actually, let me turn this light off real quick. Speaking of creative, I want more moody lighting. No, I'm going to turn it back on. Turn that back on there. So a lot of us think that being paid to be creative would be a dream come true, and it is. I do not regret at all or have any remorse or any second doubts about being hired on by the Houston Museum of Natural Science to be their YouTube channel manager. Basically, all the content that goes onto YouTube goes through me first, and I upload my own content to the HMNS YouTube channel. My own pieces that I write and flesh out and script and collect and shoot and get B-roll for and tell my stories. But I'm in charge of the Houston Museum of Natural Science YouTube channel now, which is a world-class museum by any stretch of the imagination. HMNS is a world-class museum. And that comes with a little bit of stress and anxiety that I will get into in a moment here. But yes, so having a little baby, an infant, Riker is 4 years old, going on 5 months old. I've been setting up this new studio, and I just started 3 weeks ago, I guess at this point, my job at the Houston Museum of Natural Science. So that's why the content hasn't been flowing as usual as it has been to YouTube and to my Geek Therapy Radio YouTube. And that's why the podcasts haven't been rolling out. And to tell you the truth, just to be frank with you, I didn't release the last broadcast as a podcast. I have a listener or two who are the voice of reason. The last broadcast, I really ripped into cancel culture, and I really got butthurt big time about cancel culture. And of course, I tried to see it and kind of be devil's advocate from both sides of the aisle. But I didn't release that as a podcast because I really want to... I want to keep Geek Therapy Radio focused, and I think talking about cancel culture kind of gets a little bit, it can't help itself but be political. I think it kind of dances too close to that political line, and Geek Therapy Radio is all about accepting everybody. So whether you're Republican or Democrat, liberal, conservative, or if you're listening from a different country, a lot of my listeners are from different countries who have different flavors of conservatism and different flavors of liberalism. It doesn't matter where you come from. It doesn't matter your walk of life. It doesn't matter the color of your skin. It doesn't matter your sexual orientation. It doesn't matter how you identify, what gender you identify, what sex you identify, who you love, who you don't love. Everybody is welcome here at Geek Therapy Radio because we are all geeks about something. So when I go off, and I'm entitled to go off, I'm entitled to my own opinions, just like anybody else is entitled to their own opinion. But so when I go off on something like cancel culture, I think that kind of gets a little bit too out of scope of what Geek Therapy Radio is. Plus, I had a turnaround. My opinion has kind of changed, altered, morphed a little bit from what it was last week in terms of cancel culture. So if you haven't been reading or watching clickbait in I guess on YouTube, and especially on social media, especially on Facebook and Twitter, the big hubbub in the last week or so has been that Dr. Seuss has been canceled, which is nonsense. And when you first read that Dr. Seuss has been canceled, it gets you all riled up, and it's what it's supposed to be. It's clickbait. But what it is a handful of Dr. Seuss books out of hundreds of Dr. Seuss books. Only a handful of Dr. Seuss books have been discontinued by the estate of Dr. Seuss. Dr. Seuss has not been canceled. Dr. Seuss is not a victim of cancel culture, but Dr. Seuss's family, Dr. Seuss's estate said, you know what? These 6 or 7 books don't kind of align with the grander ethos of Dr. Seuss. And that's kind of what I did with Geek Therapy Radio last week. I let the broadcast play, but I didn't upload it as a podcast because it strayed a little bit too much from the motto and the mission statement of Geek Therapy Radio. That's exactly what happened to Dr. Seuss. It's not that Dr. Seuss has been canceled or will ever be canceled. It's that the estate themselves said, you know what? These 6 or 7 books they don't align with the 95% of the other books. So we're going to discontinue these books. Cancel culture didn't demand that these Dr. Seuss books be canceled. Dr. Seuss's estate said, we're going to get out ahead of this, and we're just going to cancel this of our own accord. Not cancel, but kind of discontinue these books for being overtly racist. And you know what? That's fine. I'm not going to get all caught up in that. More Geek Therapy Radio to come. Don't go anywhere. This is live, folks. Live recording. Welcome back to Geek Therapy Radio. You've got your mental curator, Johnny Hamburger. What I meant at the end of the last segment about this is live recording is that if you were watching on YouTube, I'm not editing this, or there may not be many edits unless I say the F word or my junk falls out of my pajama pants. Can you see? Look, this is real. This is real here. I'm wearing pajama pants. Yes, I'm wearing underwear, but anyway, okay, TMI there. I'm not going to make any edits here unless something disastrous happens with my anatomy or speech that YouTube and the FCC frowns upon. So no F words and S words. Well, S words, can you say S words on the radio after the watershed? That's not something I want to test. And you know what? To let you behind the scenes here a little bit of how radio works, especially if you're watching on YouTube, and there may be people that are watching on YouTube that have never turned on terrestrial radio. That could very well be the case. I can't imagine a 13-year-old kid turning on AM radio to listen to conservative talk radio, for instance, or NPR for that matter. They're going to listen to NPR through podcasts, and they're just not going to listen to conservative talk radio, period. That's just the truth. 13-year-old kid? Not many, besides the tokens. Anyways, I lost my train of thought, and this is the realness of how radio works. I was going to talk about curse words and the FCC and how radio works in that regard. See, any other recording, any other podcast, I would have stopped right there, slapped that thick boy spacebar and have done an edit point and go back to see what I was talking about and catch myself. Nope. We are flying by the seat of our pants here. So the way radio works in terms of the FCC and curse words. I wondered a moment ago, if I said the S word, what would happen? And here's the truth. Here's behind the curtain. Odds are, on my show, Geek Therapy Radio, which honestly I haven't checked when it airs. I think it airs at least Saturday nights right now at 10 p.m. and on Sundays at 6 p.m. I'm not sure if it still airs Sundays at 9 a.m. I may have been preempted by something else, and I didn't check last week. That's kind of a week-to-week basis as far as Geek Therapy Radio being on at 9 a.m. on Sunday. I hope it's still on 9 a.m. Sunday. That'd be great. But when I left iHeart as a full-time employee, I said, you don't have to keep 9 a.m. If a paid programming comes along and says, we'll offer you X amount of dollars for 9 a.m., of course, I don't expect to be at 9 a.m. on Sunday. But the point is, let's say my show versus a nationally syndicated show like Walton and Johnson or Michael Berry or something like that. If I, on Geek Therapy Radio, who is not a primetime show, like I mentioned, 10 p.m. Saturdays, that's not primetime at all, AM radio, 6 p.m. Sundays, that's better, but it's not primetime. 9 a.m. Sunday, that's even better, but still not prime time. Like I said, I'm not a Michael Berry, I'm not a Rush Limbaugh, God rest his soul. I don't have that scope. I don't have that many listeners. Let's just be honest. In comparison to what Rush Limbaugh had or Sean Hannity has or Michael Berry has or what have you. So if I said the S word here in my radio broadcast, the dirty word for shoot, just replace the oo with an I, the OO with an I. If I said the S word, let's take it one further. If I said the F word, what would happen to me? Honestly, probably nothing. Probably nobody would notice. The FCC, unless you're unlucky and they're just randomly listening to your show, if you're a small show like mine is, if they're just randomly listening to a small show and you say the F word, abso-freaking-lutely, they will contact the radio station and they will be held to pay up to and including $1 million fine and losing it's not $1 million. $1 million is if you mess up an EAS alert. I don't know what the fine is for the F word, but you can still technically lose your license. The radio station could lose the license for airing the F word. Technically. Will that happen? Probably not. So if the FCC was randomly listening to my show, my small radio show, which is not nationally syndicated, and they heard me say the F word, the FCC, honestly, what would probably happen is they would email the program director, they would email Justin King, or they would email Brian Erickson or something like that and say, hey, your host said the F word the other day. Don't let it happen again. Or they could say, your host said the F word the other day, here's a $50,000 fine or whatever. But what would really happen in 99.9% of times is if I said the F word on my radio show, absolutely freaking, I'm not going to say the real F word, absolutely freaking nothing would happen. Nothing. Because people saying the F word, the F-bomb getting across the airwaves on public broadcast radio happens more often than you think. It usually happens with telephone callers, with people calling into a call-in type radio show. They'll get hot and bothered and say the F word, and somebody's asleep at the wheel and they won't hit the 10-second dump button on the audio buffer, which works almost exactly like a CD buffer. Anti-skip CDs. I am dating myself. They wouldn't catch it. It would go across the air, and usually nothing would happen. Honestly, usually nothing would happen unless. See, so let's use the Sean Hannity show for example. I would use Rush Limbaugh, but Rush Limbaugh is no longer with us, and just you get what I'm saying. A nationally syndicated show, how many tens of millions of listeners every single day. If Sean, that's kind of tough. That's kind of tough. If the FCC wasn't particularly listening to that show that day of Sean Hannity, of a nationally syndicated show, if the FCC wasn't listening for some reason, and a caller and an F-bomb went across the airwaves on a nationally syndicated show, If the FCC wasn't listening, probably nothing would happen. Unless a caller calls in or somebody emails the program director or emails the producer or whatever. If somebody listening complains about it, then something might happen. But so if the FCC isn't specifically listening, nothing would happen. But if if a bunch of listeners email, which is increased odds of it happening if you have 20 million listeners, if somebody emails and says, hey, we heard the F-bomb on the radio, I was offended, yeah, that would make its way up to the FCC, and then the FCC would get involved. But like I said, if the FCC wasn't specifically listening at that point in time, honestly, probably nothing would happen. Also, I didn't know I'd get so kind of behind the curtain here, but maybe some of you listening could appreciate it. Maybe somebody watching on YouTube can appreciate it. And again, if you're on YouTube watching this and you've already slammed the dislike button, I hope you didn't. But if you did, I can understand. I'm putting this content out there because I haven't put much out there recently. This is how a radio show gets made. Off the cuff, no edits. But if somebody called up and complained that they heard the F-bomb, then that's when the FCC would get involved. But if the FCC didn't hear it the first time, then nothing would happen. And that's all I would say on that subject. You know, it's kind of funny. Speaking of the FCC and such, I have, and I keep checking my camera because I hopefully it doesn't tilt out of view here. Behind me, I don't know if you can see on the YouTube, I have got a couple of ham radios. They're nothing special. They're the Bofang radios that you can get for like $25 on Amazon or something like that. I don't have my ham license. I do not operate. I do not transmit on any ham frequencies because I don't have my license, but it's still fun to listen to local repeaters. If you're in Houston, a good repeater to listen to is the one that's on top of the Williams Tower in the Galleria, which is the highest skyscraper in Houston. The frequency is 444.300. So if you have a ham radio or any radio that can, or like a SDR scanner, where's my SDR antenna? It's somewhere down there, software-defined radio. Tune to 444.300 if you're in Houston, and you can hear that repeater probably all over Houston. I've picked it up as far away as Kingwood. I'm in Missouri City, and I pick it up. But I was talking about the FCC. What if I were to start operating transmit on a ham radio frequency? So if I hit transmit on 444.300, honestly, because to tap into a repeater, you have to send out the correct tones and the correct protocol, which my radio is not set up to do. So if I transmitted on 444.300, would the FCC come after me guns a-blazing? No. They wouldn't. They would have to be listening specifically at that specific point in time when I do it. And I would have to do it repeatedly for them to triangulate where I am. So there's a lot of concern about these radios and people illegally using the frequencies, which both is and isn't a concern. But anyways, more Geek Therapy Radio coming up. Don't go anywhere. Welcome back to Geek Therapy Radio. You've got your mental curator, Johnny Hemberger. If you are watching this on YouTube, you'll notice that between segments, my mouth moves and you can't hear anything. That's because I don't have OBS set to record this microphone through my Tascam interface. And by that, I mean I haven't figured out how to do that. This is not just a normal USB this is not a USB condenser microphone. This is a 20 in, 20 out professional grade audio interface, so it's not as simple as just plugging it in and you're off and running doing Zoom meetings, or you're off and running recording this microphone through OBS. It has to do with the drivers being used, ASO drivers, and all that sort of whatnot. And it's a little pain in the butt to get. It's a pain in the butt to get this Tascam US 20x20 to play nice with OBS. So again, if you're watching on YouTube and in between the bump music, you see my mouth moving, you couldn't hear me, that's because I'm talking to my freaking self because I wasn't recording into Reaper, which is my chosen DAW. I used to be all about, that's kind of a good subject for this segment. Those of you listening on the radio, a lot of you maybe, are musicians, singers, songwriters, or podcasters, and you have your chosen DAW. DAW stands for Digital Audio Workstation. My DAW for the last, seriously, probably almost 18 to 20 years has been Cakewalk. It was Cakewalk Home Studio back when I first started using it. The professional version I've been using for 15 years it's called Cakewalk Sonar. I know a lot of you listening right now who do podcasts and make music are familiar with Cakewalk Sonar. That has been my DAW of choice for the past 15 years or so. And I will say that if I'm recording music, like let's say I'm recording an acoustic guitar, I'm coming up with a rhythm track, I'm recording bass, I'm recording synths, I'm putting together a full polished song, I will not of course, but I will use Cakewalk Sonar. That is what I am most comfortable with. I was certified with Pro Tools, funnily enough, but I don't prefer Pro Tools. I know my way around Pro Tools. I don't prefer Pro Tools. I prefer Cakewalk Sonar for musical creativity. But I have found recently, probably over the past 6 months, my DAW of choice for podcasts is now Reaper. Reaper is amazing. You can use Reaper for free. It's kind of set up like WinRAR. It's like, hey, you can use this for as long as possible. We say you can use it for 60 days or 60 hours or whatever for free. And then after that, we highly suggest you pay for it. It's kind of open source freeware like that, fully featured. You're not restricted by anything, as far as I know, in Reaper if you never pay for it. I paid for it. I paid the $60 or $70 for it because it is such an amazing piece of audio audio software that the people who develop, I think it's Kukos, the people who develop Reaper deserve the $60 straight up. If you're thinking about getting a new DAW, or you're getting into podcasting or whatever, and you also have a Steam account and you spend $60 every once in a while on a video game, which I freaking don't. Maybe once a year I'll spend $60 on a video game. But if you spend $60 regularly on software, on Steam download, and you are a podcaster, maybe skip one game and give Kukos and Reaper your $60. It is such an amazing piece of software. And if you're coming from Pro Tools, if you're coming from Cakewalk Sonar, if you're coming from, why am I blanking out on the rest of them? Oh, what's the other popular one? I'm blanking out, and I know that there's some people just screaming at their speakers right now. Reason is another one. Fruity Loops, not so much. Fruity Loops is more catered towards just making club bangers really quick on your iPhone. I know that it's more involved than that. I have Fruity Loops. I like Fruity Loops, but it's not. Fruity Loops isn't the best for podcasts. Isn't the best for recording and manipulating raw audio. It's for like manipulating loops in MIDI and such. But I'm just saying, if you're into podcasts, and honestly, if you've been using Audacity for your podcast, which I know a lot of people do use Audacity for their podcasts. Am I getting out of frame here? I know that a lot of people do use Audacity for making podcasts, and if you're comfortable with Audacity, you've been using Audacity for a long time, fine. But I would highly suggest making the jump at least to Reaper. Reaper is so, and I'll give you the case in point here. The reason why Reaper is so much better than Audacity in my point of view, especially when you start getting more adept to recording podcasts and working with audio in general, is that Audacity allows you to open plugins. Like you can open the plugins in real time and see how you're manipulating and more importantly, hear how you're manipulating audio in real time. It's real-time effects where you can see what you're doing, versus Audacity, where let's say you open a compressor in Audacity. You have to do the settings for the compressor, so the threshold, the ratio, the knee, the release, the attack and such for the compressor, and then you hit apply. And then you got to hear how it sounds in the audio, and you go from there. It's called a destructive edit. In Reaper and in Cakewalk Sonar and in Pro Tools and other DAWs like that, you can do non-destructive edits on the fly. So you can adjust compressor settings in this case on the fly without doing a permanent edit to the audio. And why is that important? It's because let's say you do the destructive edit to your audio in Audacity. You get the compressor sounding the way you want the compressor to sound. So your whispers are just as loud as your yells. That's what a compressor does. In a nutshell, oversimplified. But let's say you add the destructive edit, you apply the compressor settings to all the audio at once, and you see the actual waveform crunch down and become uniform. Okay, that's great. And you do the makeup gain, you do the makeup gain on the fader, you do the makeup gain in the compressor itself upon rendering out the audio file, whatever. It's a destructive edit, and you can see that it's a destructive edit on the waveform. That's fine and dandy. Let's say you get 20 minutes into the podcast and you want to undo it for some reason. You want to make some sort of change, and you've already made all these cuts and edits and cuts and splices in the audio file. Well, now you're kind of screwed because you did a destructive edit. And that's why moving up to, I'll say up to, because Audacity is really basic and free in all of its glory. But once you get more advanced, I would say a natural progression is to move up to Reaper, because you can start making those non-destructive edits and you can start seeing and hearing how you're affecting audio in real time without committing that edit to the audio. At any point in time, I can go back right now and change my compressor settings. I can add a chorus effect, I can add a reverb, I can do whatever I want to it non-destructively, and then just bypass the effect if I don't want the effect on the audio anymore. That's called a non-destructive edit. So Reaper is an amazing piece of audio software if you record podcasts, and I know that it is full featured as far as recording songs. I could whip out the acoustic guitar, bring my microphone down, which you can see on YouTube. It's a MXL V67G that I bought in 2003 when I first went to audio engineering school. I could bring this microphone down, place it place it about 12 inches from the 12th fret, a little bit off axis, maybe a little closer, 6 inches, a little bit off axis, whatever. I could start strumming the acoustic guitar, and I could fully flesh out a song in Reaper, and then I can go through. I know I could, using MIDI and synths and everything, plugins, that I could hash out like an organ, because I don't have a pipe organ, so I can bring in a pipe organ using a synthesizer baked into Reaper. I know I can do that, but I haven't put that time and effort into do that. That's why I said that when I flesh out songs that I prefer to use Cakewalk Sonar, because I am a breeze at using Cakewalk Sonar in that regard, using MIDI, blending it with synthesizers, and blending it with actual analog audio recording. I am way more comfortable in Cakewalk than I am in Reaper. But one of the huge reasons why I like Reaper is that Reaper is cross-platform, and that's huge. Cakewalk Sonar is not cross-platform. Cakewalk Sonar is PC only. It is not on Mac. It is not on Linux. Pro Tools is on PC and it's on Mac, but it's not on Linux. Reaper, and this is huge here, huge reason why I switched to Reaper for podcast. Reaper is available on Linux, PC, and Mac, which is amazing, which means that if I felt so inclined, and I've done this before, you can go back through the podcast archives and listen. I've recorded entire podcasts, recorded and edited podcasts on my Raspberry Pi 4 and going back further to my Raspberry Pi 3. And it's amazing. The Raspberry Pi, you plug in a USB condenser microphone, so like a Samson Meteor or a Yeti Blue or something like that. Actually, Yeti Blue, I believe it's the basic model of Yeti Blue, like a Yeti Snowball. Anything that doesn't require special drivers, you plug that into one of the USB ports on a Raspberry Pi, you load up Reaper, which is exactly the same version of Reaper that's on PC and exactly the same version of Reaper that's on Mac. And you're off to the races recording songs, recording podcasts, and I can save the session to the Dropbox, which is kind of harder to do on a Raspberry Pi and on Linux, period. But it can be done through the web browser. And then I can open up a project that I started in Reaper on a Raspberry Pi and finish it on my Mac or finish it on my PC. Reaper is awesome. And I kind of want to talk about DaVinci Resolve here, maybe going into the next segment. There's been so much happening in science and tech that has been flying by the radar. Raising a kid and starting a new job, it's tough. I wouldn't change anything for the world. It's tough. But anyways, we'll talk more about that coming up. More Geek Therapy Radio. Don't go anywhere. Welcome back to Geek Therapy Radio. You've got your mental curator, Johnny Hemberger, and we are now in the fourth and final segment of the radio show. If you are watching this on YouTube, actually, if you're listening to this on the radio, I suggest you go to Geek Therapy Radio on YouTube. Just seriously, type in Geek Therapy Radio in YouTube or Geek Therapy Radio Podcast into YouTube. It'll come up. Once you start typing Geek Therapy, you'll see Geek Therapy Radio come up. Just make sure you're looking for the red, white, and black color scheme across anything. If you're looking for Geek Therapy Radio in your favorite podcast player, so if you're listening to Geek Therapy Radio, or you're searching for Geek Therapy Radio on Spotify, or you're searching for Geek Therapy Radio on the iHeartRadio app, or you're searching for Geek Therapy Radio on Apple Podcasts, whatever. If you're searching for Geek Therapy Radio podcast across anything, any platform, any social media, anything ever, make sure it's the red, white, and black color scheme. The actual logo might change from platform to platform, possibly, but it's always a pixelated red, white, and black theme, and that's how you know you got me. So like I mentioned, if you're listening to the radio, I'm uploading this recording to YouTube with the camera and everything, which is a Canon SL3, a 250D, depending where you are in the world. I'm uploading this to YouTube because I've just been there's been so many changes in life happening, and I haven't been able to upload a new video to YouTube in quite a while. I wrote a script, and I've started fleshing out a video for the Geek Therapy Radio YouTube about the Nintendo Switch Lite and why I prefer the why I like the Nintendo Switch Lite, given that I already have a vanilla Nintendo Switch. So I have two Nintendo Switches, and I find myself playing the Nintendo Switch Lite the most. So I was making a video about that. And it's kind of funny in the script, and I swear I'll release that video eventually. But in the script, I don't use the N-word at all. The second most hated N-word on YouTube is Nintendo. Anybody who runs a relatively small channel like I do, I think I'm coming up on 5,000 subscribers at some point. I'm like at 4,400 or 4,500 right now on Geek Therapy Radio on YouTube. If you are not a huge channel, do yourself a favor and never ever audibly record the word Nintendo into your voiceover. Nintendo will clamp down on that. YouTube will clamp down on that. Your video will get no traction if you mention Nintendo at all if you're a small channel. It's just not happening. Just the way Nintendo is. The way in their agreement with YouTube. You can make the best video ever, but if you mention Nintendo anywhere in it, the algorithm kills it. Absolutely kills it. But I am working on that video where I don't mention that N-word. And now to come to think of it, I've said the word Nintendo in this podcast. I will take my 12 views to the bank. That is unless you share it. If people share this video, that's something the algorithm has no control over, is people actually like sharing a video. So if you work the algorithm as wrongly as possible, like if you make a video to purposefully hit the algorithm as horribly as possible. So let's say you say the word. Let's say it's a 2.5 minute video of random pictures and random B-roll of nothing that makes sense. And then the dialogue is just a bunch of random stuff, but you're including the words Donald Trump and Nintendo in the podcast or in the YouTube video. You can guarantee yourself that the algorithm is going to kill it. You cannot hit the algorithm with the T word or the N word, and in this case, Nintendo. You can't hit the YouTube algorithm with those two words and expect any traction. But the algorithm has no control over sharing. So a video can go viral that the algorithm hates, but people are sharing and sharing and sharing and sharing and sharing. So I have said the word physically or audibly into this microphone for this broadcast and YouTube upload. I've said the words Trump and I've said the words Nintendo. The algorithm is red flag in this video. But if you shared it, I'm not telling you to share it. I'm just saying if you did share it a bunch, then that's how the views will go up, because the algorithm is going to squash it. And like I mentioned earlier, I'm going to take the 12 views that this video gets, roughly. I mean, in comparison to other uploads that I've made that have tens of thousands of views, I think my PSP video, the first PSP video I've uploaded, is encroaching darn near on 200,000 views, almost a fifth of a million views. And maybe in the next year it'll have 250,000 views. Maybe eventually it'll have 1 million views. I don't know. So I have a video on my channel that is doing very well. It's that first PSP video. It has close to 200,000 views. I've got other videos on there that have tens of thousands of views. This video is, just by its very nature and by its length and by how I've hit the algorithm with the T word and the N word, Nintendo and Trump, again, I said it, the algorithm's going to squash it. And that's not a political statement. I don't mean that I'm taking a political stance on that. I just mean that, I hate this phrase, it is what it is. It is what it is in terms of the algorithm and words you use. You can't, QAnon, which is probably another phrase that I shouldn't be saying on YouTube. QAnon cannot upload a video to YouTube and say the word QAnon. They can't. The YouTube's going to kill it. It's going to kill it. Except that QAnon would be more inclined to share amongst themselves, to take the link of the YouTube video and share it. That is if YouTube doesn't censor it altogether and cancel the upload, so to speak. There's all these different facets to how YouTube works, and just letting you know, if you're listening to the radio broadcast and you just decide to go watch this on YouTube, it's not going to get a lot of views unless some sort of miracle happens, which is kind of funny because, like I mentioned earlier, I am the YouTube channel manager of the Houston Museum of Natural Science, and I'm expected to kind of know these things to ramp up the museum's foothold on YouTube, to optimize its foothold on YouTube. So anybody who makes a video for that channel, it goes through me. The ideas for the channel go through me, and it's just it's really kind of basic stuff, is what's going to work best for the algorithm. And I've looked, you can see the metrics and the analytics. I've only been here 3 weeks, and we're getting more subscribers than before I came on. We are getting more view duration, average view duration, than we were 3 weeks ago. And our click-through rate is improved. And I mean like 300%, like across the board, we're getting like 300% more subscribers per, it's kind of hard to tell because I've only been here for 3 weeks, but like per 28 days is the metric that YouTube uses. So up, subscribers are up, click-through rate is up, and view duration is up on that channel. So, and that's just from very basic knowledge of how the algorithm works. So it's kind of funny that on my own channel, I release a video that is 40 minutes long. It's going to be 39 minutes long, pretty much. Yeah, it's going to be about 39 minutes long, maybe a few seconds over, which I know the algorithm is changing in terms of video length. It kind of used to be like the golden rule was make a video of at least 10 minutes. And you saw a bunch of YouTubers doing this. And maybe this is hopefully this is fascinating to you just listening to the radio broadcast to kind of know how YouTube works. The old magic number was 10 minutes, and you would see YouTubers stretching scripts, and just make kind of like not commentary, but stretching that script to be 3 or 4 pages at least, so that they could hit that magic 10-minute mark. Because you hit that magic 10-minute mark, and then you have average view duration of like over 50%. Let's say you keep audience retention for like 50% of that 10-minute video. They don't even have to finish the video. As long as they watch like 50% of the video, then the YouTube algorithm, and you didn't say Nintendo, and you didn't say Trump, and you didn't say QAnon, and you didn't say whatever, Patriot. If you didn't say any of those keywords, then the YouTube, and you got 50% retention and the video is over 10 minutes long, the algorithm would latch onto those videos and promote it to other random people. That's just how it worked. But I think YouTube is lifting those restrictions, that it doesn't have to necessarily be 10 minutes in order for it to gain traction. It has to do with view duration and how many people are clicking your videos and how many ads they're going to see. It all boils down to the ads. I've rambled long enough for this radio broadcast. You are worthy of love. You are worthy of giving love and receiving love. We are all geeks about something. Always remember that. I'll talk to you next time.